Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, we're joined by Jeffrey Kohn, the co-founder and CEO over at TopFan. In today's episode, we're going to talk about his journey from working for Larry Ellison and Keith Block to building technology that's reshaping how fans connect with artists. We're going to explore how TopFan is taking out or trying to take out Ticketmaster's monopoly, helping artists own their own fan data, and why every creator, musician, author, podcaster should be thinking like a business. Before we do, I've got a quick ad read for you from Predictable Revenue. Founders, let's be real. Scaling a company is tough. You're juggling product, revenue, hiring, and a million other decisions. But what if you've had, a couple of founders that have been there and done that to help you navigate the chaos? That's where our founder coaching program comes in. Whether you're trying to find your first customers or fine-tune your go-to-market strategy, we've got somebody that can help scale sales predictably. Ready to take your startup to the next level? Give us a call. Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so that you can build it yourself. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into the episode, I'd love to kind of talk about how we got connected here. And I'll kind of give a bit of an intro for those listeners that maybe don't read the newsletter. I'd written a newsletter to the Founders Edition newsletter and kind of whiny and complaining about my experience going to a concert. And it wasn't about the concert itself. The concert was fantastic. We saw Lawrence in New York. It was an incredible show. Complaint I had was about, the experience as a fan and just as another founder. I feel for everything that the artist had to go through in order to make a couple of bucks. And they were a big 8-piece band. And so I was trying to do the math and thinking, man, these guys put on a great show, packed a decently sized venue. And I'm like, they probably didn't make nearly as much as I thought. And that really irked me. And that this was kind of the inspiration of the newsletter I sent out. And I'll throw a link to that in the show notes. But Jeff, you were kind enough to respond and help kind of educate me on what I got right and what I got wrong. And so I'd love to, if we could start there and like what kind of spoke to you about that newsletter and what were the pieces that kind of touched on what TopFan's doing?
Yeah. So the title of the newsletter was, how to kill Ticketmaster. And that's sort of what we're doing at TopFan. We've been in this space since 2013. I think you're going to ask me a little bit about sort of the origin story of the company. I can talk about that when you'd like me to. But in a nutshell, we are helping our clients across sports, film and television, and then, of course, music, go direct to their fans. And the way that they're able to sort of break that monopoly that is Ticketmaster and the large ticketing platforms is exercising their right to sell a certain percentage of their tickets directly and using what we used to call the fan club model and take that to the year 2025. And what we're doing for musicians in particular is we're helping them stand up their own special corner of the internet through a white labeled branded website and complimentary iOS and Android app where they can invite those best fans in, offer them the ability to buy tickets directly, be able to distribute their music directly, distribute their merchandise directly, live streams and other things. And while that is great for the fan because it cuts down the problems with scalping and bots and ticket inflation, it's actually even better for the music artists because they finally know who those best fans are. As we talked about before, when you look at the economics of fandom, it's typically the top 20% of the fan base that generates 80% of the revenue. And if all those music artists are doing are communicating with them through social media, they're not capturing that first party data. They don't know who those people are. They know they have followers, but they don't know the email addresses, phone numbers, psychographics of those fans. The only way to capture that is if they're engaging their fans directly on their own owned and operated platform, again, website, iOS, Android apps, so they can not only distribute content to them and distribute tickets, but actually capture the first party data. So now they can remarket to those fans for the next 10, 20, 30 years and maximize the lifetime value of those fans.
I love that. And I feel like that not owning the audience was the piece that I was caught on in that, we'd seen this amazing band and yet we have no way of communicating with them. They have no direct line to communicate with us. We found them on a Spotify playlist because they were, their music was associated with another band we listened to. I'm like, it's great for them, but it's also a very risky business model. It relies on, in my experience as a fan and being able to find somebody like this, is I have to listen to these playlists and they have to hope that Spotify adds their music to the algorithm adds their music to this playlist. That just, it feels very out of control to me. And I was just sitting there thinking, and not the whole time because the show is amazing, but there's always that entrepreneur brain in you that's like, man, if they only had a newsletter, they could own so much more. And to your point with the community, there's much more than just the newsletter, but it's really, I think the piece I was stuck on was owning that fan relationship, which is
Yeah.
a huge
And,
piece.
and as we talked before, that's the origin story of TopFan. I was working for a big data company that everybody's heard of, Oracle, Larry Ellison, Keith Block, people like that. And I found myself in a room with several movie executives at a household name movie studio. And we were talking a little about the future of their business. And they said that everything was going to be moving direct to fan, streaming over the top. This is circa 2013. And I asked naively, what sort of data do you know about your fans? And the response I heard from the CEO of that studio was, I have no first party data about my fans. And I was a little bit perplexed by that response. And I asked him to explain. And he said, well, because we distribute our movies through the cinema chains, AMC theaters and Regal and so forth. And we sell our home entertainment DVDs through the big box stores, Target, Walmart, et cetera. And those entities may know some first party data about the people attending the movies or purchasing the DVDs, but none of that data was making it back to the studio. And then I asked why. I said, well, listen, I'm looking at your Facebook page and you've got 28 million followers. Surely you know about those folks. And he laughed and he said, do you think that Mark Zuckerberg and the folks at Facebook would just give me that data? No. Instead, I have to pay them to market to the fans that followed me. And so they had no first party data. And that just had that sort of visceral reaction. I was like, how could that be? And I reached out to friends of mine that were in the sports industries and the music industries, and they all faced the same problem. And social media was just making it worse because now not only were they not getting the first party data, and were social media companies now charging those entities to market to their fans to announce their new music or announce their ticket sales or announce their new movies. They were now starting to change the algorithms. So you didn't know, the fans didn't know if they were actually, I'm sorry, the entities were not sure that their fans would know if they pushed out something new, because the algorithm decides who gets the visibility and who doesn't get the visibility. So that's a huge problem, right? To a multi-billion dollar industry of sports and entertainment. And that was the catalyst for us to go and solve it. And we quickly realized the only way to solve that is if you start to establish a direct to fan relationship between the artist or the movie studio or the sports team and their fan. And the only way you're going to do that is if you create some sort of place to send those fans and create value for those fans to go there so that they would register and start to capture that first party data and that psychographics and that demographics. So that's sort of the origin story of our company.
Love that. Talk to me about some of the early steps. Like it's one thing to say, hey, I want to kind of take on this two-headed dragon. How did you validate that artists, teams, and fans actually wanted this?
Yeah. So, this is the typical, founding story. I was working for a company that was, this is how I paid the bills. I've got family and kids and so forth, and can't really walk away from that and throw everything into the wind and do a startup. So what I did is I started reaching out again to folks that were in the space, friends that I might have had from university or from, just along the way, and asking them to validate, is there a problem? And surely there's a problem. And then, the next thing is, try to understand what that total addressable market size is. And it's enormous market. So this is interesting. Evaluating what solutions were out there in the space. And there was really nothing that was of quality. And then bootstrapped essentially a prototype using, these sort of, at the time it was a company called Envision. It's since gone now, but there's other solutions like Figma and other ones that have filled the gap and built a beautiful Envision and basically faked it till we maked it, right? So the idea of going in and scheduling a call with a famous music artist or two and showing them a prototype of what it would look like and saying, if we brought this to you, would you use it? Would you do it? And then understanding how would they want to pay for it. In the music industry, usually music artists don't write checks. They like to receive checks. So had to work on, models that would work with them. And we got enough yeses that we said, okay, let's go take some of the co-founder money and invest it back in, build it, and then, grew a company from there.
Do you remember the first artist that trusted you with their fan page, with their data?
I do. It was artist, a country music artist named Carrie Underwood.
I've heard of them. That's a pretty big get for your first customer.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in that regard, but it was the right timing for them, and we were able to use that as in the music industry, like most industries, reference selling is very important. And one of the things that I also learned, I learned this from my time at Oracle, is you've got to spend time in front of customers. You have to do more listening than talking. You have to hear what are the pain points, understand what how they're doing things today, what is causing pain, and then not necessarily present a solution right away, but rather say, okay, thank you for that discovery. Thank you for sharing that information with us. Let us go back and think about it, and then come back a couple weeks later with a proposal, with what we would do. And what was fun in the early stages of TopFan was hearing all the great ideas and the pain points that our customers have, and that very much shaped the product that we have today. I'm sure our team would like to take credit for all the great technologies that we have. The fact of the matter is, 90% of what we've developed came directly out of trying to address pain points and ideas that we heard from our clients.
What was that first pain point that you were solving for your first customer with Carrie Underwood?
Yeah, interestingly, people would often say, oh, they need more revenue. And I think that is certainly obviously a pain point. It's expensive to go on the road. What you talked about a few moments ago, the tour buses, the fuel, the stage. What people don't realize is that everything you see when you go to a big concert, that's not owned by the venue. That's owned by the band. The band brings all of that in, sets it up. The guys with the big black boxes setting up, and they're incredibly efficient how they do it. And then they're on to the next show and the next show. And the reason they go back to back to back night after night is because for the cost, for the economies of scale to kick in, they need to, have so many shows because it's expensive being out on the road and having that much staff. One would think that was the main pain point, and it is a pain point, but it's not the number one. The number one pain point that we were trying to address is, again, back to that lack of data, because anything in the sports entertainment industry, there's an acronym called P&A, publicity and advertising. It is so expensive to do P&A. Think about when a movie releases or a new album in the music space comes out, the billboards and the ads that you see, it's so expensive. So think about how much more efficient and profitable sports entertainment businesses would be if they could lower their cost of P&A. This is the reason that music artists sign to labels traditionally, because the label will make an investment helping them cut the record and then do the P&A. But then they own the masters and they own the music in perpetuity in many cases. But if an artist or if a movie studio could lower their cost of P&A because they own the first party data, and they can use a newsletter and they can use text messaging and they can use emails because they actually own the data, they can lower their P&A, which then in turn increases the profit margin, right? So it's a really interesting dynamic in the space that we're in direct to fan. There's an old adage that you had to have millions of fans to make a lot of money, because it's the law of big numbers, right? You hit a bunch of people, and then some of those folks will convert to sales. In our world, it's actually almost a law of small numbers. If you can create 10,000 dedicated fans that spend $100 with you a year, which isn't that much when you factor in merchandise, ticket sales, streaming, subscriptions, et cetera. $100 isn't that much. That's $1 million business. So you can actually build a very successful business with smaller numbers. And so that was the number one pain, was helping these folks capture first party data to lower their P&A cost.
Very interesting. And audience, you're going to have to bear with me here because I'm just so fascinated by the space. We're going to do a little bit of Jeff's story, and then we're going to geek out on kind of how the industry works, because I'm not starting a startup in this space, but I feel like there's that, like, I'm threatening to do so, and I don't have any ideas or any thoughts, but I'm really enjoying learning more about the industry and how it's kind of locked up by this duopoly of Ticketmaster and Live Nation. I'm curious, kind of educate the audience. What's fundamentally broken about the way Ticketmaster operates today?
Yeah, I think the challenge is twofold. One is from the artist side, and then the other challenge is from the consumer side. And I can speak to both, but starting with what your audience probably thinks about is from the consumer side. And that is that if we ever tried to, I think I was sharing with you, I was recently trying to get World Cup tickets. I'm a big soccer fan. And very hard to get soccer. If you've been reading the news about FIFA, the governing body of soccer, of international soccer, they built their own system for ticketing. They determined who got to buy tickets, and then if you get tickets, and the way they've done it is everybody who gets chosen to buy tickets is able to buy 40 tickets, which is a lot.
40?
40 tickets.
40.
And yeah, crazy. So that means that there's a bunch of haves and there's a bunch of have-nots out there. And the reason, at least what you read in the press, of why they chose to go that way is because they charge a 15% seller fee and a 15% buyer fee on the resale market. So they assume that people are not going to go to all 40 games. That would be very expensive and probably, hard for the average family to do. But they assume that those people buy as many tickets as they can, and then they'll put it on the resale market. So what that allows is FIFA to get a second bite at the apple, or even a tertiary bite at the apple. And that generates more revenue. And I think that's a similar what's happening right now, and it's in the news, and that's why I use it as an example. That is a microcosm of what's happening with these large ticketing platforms that have a monopoly. If the only way that you can go see your favorite artist is to buy tickets through Ticketmaster, Live Nation, et cetera, and that's the only way you can do it, then those entities are incentivized to allow for scalping and incentivized to allow for the bots to come in and eat up all the tickets because they know they're going to get a chance to sell them a second and third time in the resale market. So I think therein lies one of the challenges from the consumer perspective, because it just drives prices up to the point that it's not tenable to go see your favorite artist any longer. From the artist side, they are equally frustrated. The artists truly care about their fans, truly want their best fans sitting in the front rows and enjoying the music and so forth. And, we've worked with clients who have gotten so frustrated by this, they've used our software and our platform as a way to make sure that the best fans are getting those tickets. And the way they do it is something I mentioned earlier, which is exercising their right to sell a certain percentage. There was a lawsuit that happened a decade or so ago that allows the artist to sell a certain percentage of their tickets directly. And what our system does is allows those fans to register. We have lots of fraud detection to prevent duplicates and make sure that it's truly a fan there. And that fan registers with our system, and then they're given a unique one-time use code, which allows them to buy those tickets before the bots get a chance at them and so forth. And what the artist loves knowing is, well, again, going back to the data thing, because the fan registered to get that code, and in some case paid a fee as a fan club fee to have access to that pre-sale code, they've captured that first party data. But then also now they know that fan is going to be paying face value for the ticket, and the best fans, the fans that help that artist be successful, are the ones that are going to be sitting in those best seats when they can make eye contact with their fans, when they're high-fiving them as they move down the runway and, the pit and things. They know that those are true fans there and not just guys that have a lot of money that bought tickets through the scalpers.
I think you were telling me about a story about, is it a country artist who is really struggling with that?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a client that we've worked with, a music artist named Eric Church, another big, sells out every show he does, fantastic artist. He has really been vocal in the press about his frustrations with the Ticketmaster monopoly. And, your audience, if they want to Google it, they can read some of the anecdotes from Eric.
It's interesting because it's not just from the ticketing and selling the ticket side of things. It's also from the booking and the venue side. I don't think the fans are the only ones and the artists are the only ones that are unhappy about this. It's also from the venue side. There's the software, there's the integrations, there is the actual element of booking and bringing shows to your venues. Can you talk to me about how ticketing is typically the Ticketmaster side of things, and then there's the venue and the booking and all of that, and that's the Live Nation side? Can you help the audience understand kind of the difference between the two and how those combine?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I know a little bit less about that, but I'll talk to what I do know, and that is that the industry, the way things have gone over the past decade or two, is the Live Nation side. And you got to remember, there's a relationship between Live Nation and Ticketmaster, has been going to the large venues and essentially bringing them under contract. In some cases, they own the venues. In many cases, just you'll see we're a Live Nation venue. And when that happens, it just kind of feeds, again, the lack of control that the artist has. And what will happen often is they will do a deal in the beginnings of a tour saying, the routing of where they will go will stay to Live Nation owned venues. There's another player in the space called Access, AXS, and these are accessed venues. So that a tour will end up being dictated by some of that. And I think, again, that causes, potentially some friction for the fans, because where a tour goes is being dictated by, again, a couple of really large players in the space.
And not, where the fan base is, and not, where the best venue is, and not where and I think the relationship is not just a partnership. It is they are both the same, one and the same company, which
Exactly.
means you've got to use one. If you want to use one, you got to use the other. It's if we think through the lenses, Hamilton Helmer's Seven Powers, those being able to lock up, those venues for multi-year contracts is effectively a cornered resource. If there's only so many stadiums you can play in North America, and you've got, 5-year agreements with all of them, you've got some pricing power and some bargaining power there.
Agreed.
And so you've got the venues locked up into these long agreements. There's all this complex software that runs the ticketing, that runs the selling, that does all of the anti-bot, that does all the ticketing. How does one even begin to start chipping away at these two companies?
Yeah, our hope, and again, what we do is create that direct relationship to the fan and help them own the data, and then build sustainability by, again, being less beholden to the algorithm, and then also creating new revenue sources, which can be significant. Our clients have generated 7 and 8 figure businesses that are recurring revenue by going directly to their fans. So that is a significant revenue driver for our clients. At the end of the day, they got to play somewhere, right? And they got to play these venues. Even though you have a direct to fan relationship and you have the power of data, and you have a little bit of the power of the purse, meaning now you've started, having money go directly between you. You've sort of cut the middleman out. At the end of the day, like I said, people love live music. It's an amazing experience to go to see a show and feel the music and be around the energy of other people. And those venues are, as you just mentioned, are essentially owned by a duopoly, monopoly situation right now. So it's going to be challenging there. That said, I think giving, if a artist has their data and has the super fans that would potentially go to those shows, and they now have the direct access, that gives them more leverage to be able to dictate some of the constraints that this duopoly has created, right? So I think that's the idea, is that they have the data. If they are able to market their shows directly, they are less beholden on the entire service value proposition that those big venues offer.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can potentially sway how things go. So I don't think they can fix everything going with technology like ours and direct to fan, but I think they can certainly use power of data to get more negotiation power.
One of the things I've heard, because I've had a couple of these conversations, is that there's, for any given show, Ticketmaster will have an agreement with a reseller to automatically parcel out 20-30% of the sales directly to a large reseller.
Yeah, there are so many deals that happen with the allocation of tickets. Tickets that when they typically there are several phases to a sale. You probably heard these from a show that you've gone to. Usually, the first sale, the very first allocation of tickets, is the fan club. What we power that thing. So that's why, for a fan who wanted to ensure that they're going to get great tickets at a face value price and not get sucked into the resale market, it's actually like buying an insurance policy. Becoming a member of the fan club,
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's $30 a year, $50 a year, whatever the price point is, that's actually great insurance, because they know they're going to get tickets. They're not going to deal with the frustration of refreshing and sitting in the waiting room on Ticketmaster. We've all been there. They know they're going to get the tickets. They're going to get the tickets they want, and they're going to get it at face value. So that's the first sale. Then what you see are these, often like the Amex pre-sale, or these other pre-sales, or there's something maybe in conjunction with a promoter, like what you're saying, where there's that secondary sale, and that bulk of tickets are typically sold there. And then it's the generals on sale, which is the one that the average person gets access to. And by the time you get to that average sale, you're just like, where'd all the seats go? Where are they? They're all gone. And you're buying nosebleeds. And then after those sell out and the bots, suck those up, now you're dealing with the resale market, where you're paying 2 and 3x face value, which is very frustrating for the average consumer.
I think the point here is that I think one of the things that you're doing by putting more of that power back into the artists, and by way of giving them a direct relationship with their fan base, and that insurance to make sure you don't miss a ticket, if you could expand that relationship with your fans to the point where you don't need to take that 30% of tickets going to resellers before they even hit the general market. That could be a huge get. And it's probably not the one and only thing, but it certainly seems like, to my eyes, a ray of sunshine in a fairly dark situation dominated by one or one and a half large players.
Yeah, I completely agree. The motivations for that, which you just described, that 30% reseller market, which obviously ends up on the secondary market where people are paying more than face value. If an artist has a strong direct to fan business, then again, that goes back to that power that leveraging, that power of leverage that I keep mentioning. They don't have to do that. They can then say, you know what? I don't want that to happen when they talk with their promoter and the folks organizing the tour. Say, you know what? Don't give up that 30% because we know that we can make sure those tickets get sold through our own fan club, and that's good for everybody.
Totally. Maybe there's an argument to expand the fan club allocations. I'm still I follow quite a few bands and I don't see the fan club nearly as often or frequently as I thought. I'm curious if you have thoughts on why.
Well, we obviously we're in this business, so we'd love to see that change. I think it's one of those things. A band is very busy. There are a lot of moving parts to a music band. Typically, a music artist has a manager, has a touring agent, has folks. We we think that obviously we're biased, but we think that every artist should have some sort of direct to fan business, aka a fan club. Even if they're not looking at it through the lens of trying to make revenue, owning the data is just so valuable for them for whatever initiative they try to do in the future. There's nothing bad than having a huge database of your fans with their names, their email addresses, their phone number, their birth date, their general location. And if you can get some additional psychographics about what they're, what makes them tick, that's a good thing to have. The technology in the fan club space, I think for a while, it may have felt like a little bit of a lift. It's like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. We don't want to do that. We just don't have time. We're so busy. But the technology has gotten good and it's gotten incredibly easy to use. Obviously, that's one of our focuses, is to make sure that any artist of any size, whether they have the infrastructure of a big management team or they're a one-man band, as they say, we want to make sure that they have access to that technology, and that's our mission.
I love that. You were doing something interesting with Tool, because I think one of the things I wanted to do in the show, and it was this kind of balance I was struggling with, was keep my phone in my pocket. And I'm generally pretty good at it, but the band that we saw called Lawrence is also one of my kids' favorite bands. And so they're like, "Can you record the whole thing?" And I'm like, "No, I'm obviously not going to do that." And I'm a bit kind of fall into the elder millennial category, but my wife and I have pretty broad taste in music, and we've been to some shows where the average age is probably in the early 20s. And those shows, there are so many phones out that it's hard to see the stage unless you're front and center. And it's a delicate balance of, hey, I want to remember this show and I want to be able to show my kids, but I want to be engaged in the show. I want to enjoy the show. I'm here to see music first and foremost. I'm not here to record music. It sounds like Tool is doing something interesting in this space. I'd love if you can kind of explain to me what they're doing and how you all got involved with.
Yeah, so if your audience isn't familiar with Tool, they're an iconic rock band. Even when I was a kid, I was listening to them, and I still listen to them now. They're just one of those bands that spans generations. Incredibly artistic band. It's not just the music; it's the art that's associated with it. It's the culture. Their fan club has a name called Tool Army, and that's a great name for it because it is truly an army of fans that just love the band, love the other fans, love the culture, and arguably have one of the largest organized fan clubs of any music artist in the world. And we happen to power their technology. Their website, toolband.com, is powered by our technology. And there's also an iOS and an Android app that's available in the stores you can download. And, it's the typical app and website. You log in, you get early access to, some content, photos, videos, pre-sale tickets, of course, all the things you would. There's a community section where the fans can talk with each other. It's very vibrant. Fans are uploading pictures and photos and talking about life. They follow each other. And then there's, they do merch drops and all the things you'd expect of a traditional fan club in the year 2025. But what makes Tool unique is they've had this for forever, a no video, no phone policy at their shows. And they sell out big venues. We're talking, arenas, if not stadiums. And to convince, 20, 30, 50,000 people to keep that phone in the pocket,
Hmm.
is pretty incredible. And I've been to concerts and someone maybe try to sneak out a phone, and sometimes this, the fans self-police, like, get that phone back in your pocket. I've even seen the lead singer, identify somebody and flat, have the spotlight, get that, really they do that. And some people say, oh, it's because they don't want they don't want that music and that video to go out onto social media because it devalues the going to seeing it live and show. I think it's actually different. I think it's because live for the moment. We are such a
Yeah.
plugged in world right now. We all have ADHD. We're constantly on our devices, screen
Hmm.
time, left and right. And going to a tool show is an experience. It really is. And I think it's in what I think the lead singer in the band, and the reason they've pushed this no phone policy so hard is because they want people to live, away from your digital things. But we all want to but because of social media, we want, in our kids, we want to show what that experience was. The question is, how can they balance that for people, right? To things. One of the things we're working on and so forth is the ability for folks in the fan club to one day be able to see those shows and rewatch them after the show, and sort of exclusive content and things like that. High resolution, great stuff. Rewatch, if not the whole concert, a couple of minutes of the concert, so people can still take that memory with them home, but again, not ruin the experience of the show itself for not only the fan, but the fans around that person who's got their phone up in their hand and things like that.
I mean, I think if there was a fan club for $30, $50 a year, that would let me access the video to the show that I just saw, and maybe to help me stay connected to the band and see the other shows that they've been doing, I think 100% I'd be subscribed, air quotes here, to a number of my favorite bands, because yeah, I mean, that's a tremendous amount of value. That's a change that I would like to see in the world. I really hope you're successful at onboarding more companies into TopFan, and I really hope that we get a chance to see Ticketmaster, Live Nation kind of crumble a little bit. I'm curious, if we kind of fast forward a little bit, what do you think is the most likely thing that's gonna, where are the cracks that are showing in their armor, or what would need to be true for Ticketmaster and Live Nation to lose their dominance?
Yeah, obviously I mentioned it before. I think that if we can empower these artists with leverage, which is data, that is definitely a opportunity. And one thing to mention, and there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, an artist can't even get the data from Ticketmaster about who's attending their shows. Again, the artist really is in that corner, that void of having no data, which is why we do what we do to help them capture and own that data fully. So there's that side of it. The second is, I think we're at a point where, anytime you're dealing with this level of monopoly, duopoly, et cetera, it's going to require the government to get involved. It's going to require legislation. It's going to require regulation to realize this is a broken system. And, the example I just gave of a few moments ago of the FIFA situation, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And the World Cup is happening here in the United States. It's happening here in the U.S. and as you probably know, also Canada and Mexico. It's a North
In
American
Canada.
World
Yeah.
Cup. This would have been an opportunity, government, to do its job and protect its citizens. I mean, this is the World Cup is is one of those lifetime events that this should have been the opportunity to come after this. And from what I can see, it didn't happen. We can speculate why it didn't happen, but it didn't happen. And so it's going to require consumers to get past the lobbying efforts and really push its elected officials to do something about this. Otherwise, it's not going to ever get changed.
Yeah, strong agree. I have less confidence in the fact that change will come. I mean, if we look at Microsoft, and while there was antitrust, you know, action leveled against them, Microsoft is still dominant. You look at the recent examples of Google and Google Chrome, and the antitrust and ruled that they were a monopoly, but you can keep Chrome because AI is going to change things. It seems like in some ways, the pessimistic view is the U.S. government isn't going to do anything. The optimistic view is the U.S. government doesn't have to do anything, because the technological change, the evolution, the Jeffrey Kohns of the world are going to be the ones that eventually pull apart Ticketmaster and Live Nation. So reason for hope, reason for optimism, reason for pessimism. But I like to kind of end on a more optimistic note that I'm excited by what you're doing. I really think it's one of those kind of cracks in Ticketmaster's armor. I think the more power that the fans have and the artists have and the creators have, and the deeper the connection they have to their followers, to their fans, to those 10,000 true fans that are going to bring them that revenue, I think the less power Ticketmaster, Live Nation are going to have over the industry in general.
Agree 100%.
Right on. If people want to learn more about TopFan, they want to connect with you, come fight the good fight at TopFan, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, well, we have two things. Topfan.com is our domain name, and you can visit our website and see examples of what we do. But we just recently, in the past month or so, launched a next generation version of our site called TopFans, plural, TOPFANS.com. And that's our attempt at trying to solve the problem that we talked about on your podcast today, because there's no cost to use it. Any music artist of any size, you don't have to be the big names like Tool to use that software. You can sign up. It's zero cost. It works on a small revenue share, on average about 10% revenue share. So we're putting allowing our clients and our partners to keep the lion's share of the money, and we use our side to cover the cost of bandwidth and hosting and data and all the things that we do for a value proposition. So we encourage folks out there, if they're in the music space or sports space and they're looking for a way to go direct to their fan, to check that out. And or if they've got their favorite band isn't doing something like this, let them know that this technology exists, and we'd be more than happy to help them.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for poking around some fun ideas with me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the great conversation, Collin.
You got it. Anytime, Jeff. And thanks to everybody. Thanks for coming on again. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch y'all next time.